Open Your Eyes is brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.
Welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Start your morning right. I am John Palacio.
And I'm Marlene Cuellar. And thank you for joining us this morning.
It's a lovely Wednesday morning, Belize. The weather is lovely over our country. We do hope that it's the same in your neck of the woods. It's hot out there. Well, we know when it comes to this time of the year what the weather is going to be like. We know what to expect. But we must say that you keep hydrated, you make sure that you're hydrated, and make sure that you're staying cool as well. Nonetheless, there are a lot of things to discuss this morning. There are a lot of things going on in the newscast as we speak, and we continue to highlight those things.
So today is day 3 of the teachers' strike, and if we did find out yesterday, we got confirmation that the Public Service Union intends to go on strike as well. Starting Monday, that's after the 21-day notice is completed, and they have been doing work to rule. They've been going on picketing during midday, and so it is a very critical time for us here in the country. There's also the Senate meeting that'll be happening today, and we'll hear more from the social partners as well as the opposition on the budget as it's been presented.
Definitely. We also did an interview with the first vice president of the PSU, who mentioned that they have already given notice, and now they're just taking their course of action. And the 21 days notice comes at, I think, at the end of at Monday, at around the 3rd of May. And from there, they continue with more action, which comes in the light of strike action, joining the Belize National Teachers Union. So what's there to expect, or what's going to come out of at least for today? Because one of the things that I noticed, Marlene, the trend is that their news coming out every day. Something is coming out every day. So I'm looking forward to what today is going to be like. And of course, these things is what we highlight in our newscast at 6 o'clock in the evening.
Well, we had Minister Henry Charles Usher, the Minister of Public Service, on Monday. One of the things we did ask him was whether or not they intend to go back to the table with the unions. There wasn't anything scheduled as yet, but he did say that the government did have the openness to come back and discuss and continue the dialogue. The private sector has offered to be mediator in the situation as well. They recognize that while both sides have very firm positions, this particular path forward, where there will be continuous strike action until someone budges, is concerning. We are in the toughest economic times we've ever faced. We are still in a pandemic, and the biggest concern is what will be the impact. And
that's the biggest question indeed, which leads me to what our first conversation is going to be about. Exactly that. We'll be chit-chatting with, of course, one of our groups who said, you know what, we need to be the mediators in this, or we're willing to play the mediators to get these parties back on the table so the discussion can continue. But also to note, Marlene, is the fact that some of the unions have pointed to some of the media houses saying that, you know what, we'll be boycotting you if some ads continue to run that seems to be attacking them.
Yeah, they have called it union busting, which is, you know, it's really interesting. When the news started to come out 2 days ago that this was an intention by some of the unions and not all, and they haven't been entirely clear on what the boycott means. Because they still say things like, well, we reserve the right to give comment and things of that nature. But one of the first things, when I look back at an interview that was done with one of the union leaders after the Commission of Inquiry, it was interesting when he said he linked advertising with journalism, that running these ads is bad journalism. And it seems to be that there is a bit of misinformation there in understanding how the media functions. As you know very well, you've been in this for so long, there are two separate departments. It is a private business. However, content that goes on air and shows like Open Your Eyes, the production of the news with our journalists in the newsroom, it's a completely separate entity from the ad breaks that we do run. Those are not, there's no link between them, there's no tie between them. And, you know, we see it all the time, even with election season, especially, where you may be speaking to one person about something really important. You know, there may be an ad that runs immediately after where someone voices an opinion on or pays to air their opinion on an issue.
And then you use the word correctly, paid. That's how the media houses stay afloat. You know, so it is to a certain extent concerning. At the same time, there must be understanding between all parties involved. If we are supposed to run a story, you want all sides from all parties involved, and that of course keeps it balanced.
And we serve the viewers fundamentally, and the viewers deserve to be able to get the full rounded picture as to what's going on and not just one perspective. And so we must keep that in mind when we continue with creating our content. So, you know, we've seen it right here. We've gotten so many different perspectives. Yesterday we had a great conversation with not even union leaders, but just teachers themselves who shed some light on how they view the issue. We've talked to parents about children being out of school. We've talked to the unions themselves, and of course we've spoken to government representatives. So it is a matter of ensuring that our viewers are able to get all sides of this issue so that they can make informed decisions or formulate opinions based on knowing all the facts from all sides. And of course we continue to do so.
And there are also chatters from parents that are saying, you know what, we're not feeling this as hard as it is or hard as it used to be when the children were actually in school. And you know, and I could speak with respect to that because my children, they're at home. And while they're at home and not being in a classroom setting, the feel of teachers being out of the classroom is not as impactful as them being there. And I'm saying this because what used to happen or what would happen then, parents would have to go pick up their children. So it brings across something sort of chaotic when the children are in the classroom, but now that they're not, you know, the question remains to be answered. What is the impact?
Well, you know, I don't want to diminish the efforts that are being made. It's making a public stance is something that we are blessed to be able to have the opportunity to do in this country. You'd be surprised how many countries, you know, people cannot get up and protest if they're in opposition of of government decisions being made. So that in itself is something that we must always acknowledge. But you're right. I think what typically happens, especially when there's a teacher strike, is that the disruption caused for parents, because they have to scramble to find out what they're going to do with their children during this time, is one that adds fuel to the message coming out from one side. And then you have another stakeholder coming in and say, find a resolution, I need my children back in school. That element is noticeably missing. And that's because parents have already made accommodations for what their children are doing at home.
Exactly, and for that reason I said that's the chatter that's going on there with respect to where parents stand. But the fight continues indeed. One more topic of note is the rate of coronavirus active cases that are in the country as we speak. We're at 105 as of today. We were at 105 cases. We went down as low as about 32. We were at 105,
we went to about 20 at one point in March.
Which simply means that we really, really need to be careful as to what goes on, where we go, and how we go, or how we do it. Look, we've been let loose to a certain extent. Friday, Saturday, up to midnight. This does not mean that you're not supposed to adhere to the protocols. It remains the same way.
Absolutely. You know, and I do encourage people. It's one of those things that I understand because I catch myself as well. We start to get a bit more comfortable. It's been over a year. You feel like you've gotten that first vaccination, so you got some level of protection. Maybe your loved ones have as well. You have an extended curfew. You're tired of being cooped up. You want to hang out with friends and whatnot. but we are simply not in a safe space. You're talking about maybe about 10% of our population that's been vaccinated so far, and really only with that first shot, so they don't have full protection as yet. And we see where variants are popping up across the world. You know, in Brazil, their variant, for some reason, is affecting children as well, even leading to cases of fatality. When we look at India and we see how they're completely overwhelmed, and for multiple reasons, including the fact that there is an oxygen shortage there. You know, you just have to pay attention to these international stories and realize that we could very easily get there. So it is not, I've spoken with healthcare workers who've made a note to me that, in fact, they are seeing far more cases than they were seeing in the past 2 months that they suspect to be COVID. They then go for testing, of course, and that's when we see the numbers coming in. 7 is better. But we want to see those numbers decline.
We want to see them decline indeed. So once again, we are here for you to make sure that you take heed of the social distancing protocols and all these protocols that could eventually, that will eventually keep us safe. So our country could get back to where it once was, get tourism back booming, and people wanting to move from point A to point Z, you know? And
let's not lose sight of the consequences here. Because what's been missed in this conversation are the 4 additional lives that have been lost in the past month due to COVID. And so it's not just talking about people getting sick or being out of work or testing positive. It's about the consequences of people who develop severe illness, end up hospitalized, and ultimately lose their lives. That's 4. I think it's about 5 weeks or so that we've lost 4 people. So, you know, to their families who are watching, we definitely extend our condolences, and we hope that the death is not in vain, that it gets the rest of us to be able to straighten up and return to the level of strictness that we have with our sanitation and health protocols as much as possible.
Definitely. So once again, we invite for you to go on out there and get vaccinated. As long as you're in the phase, go on out there, get vaccinated, and try to be as safe as possible. And then again, for those of us who've been vaccinated, it does not mean that you take off your mask. It does not mean that you go back and you hug grandma. It does not mean that you could be out socializing and just doing what you feel. No, no, no. We need to be as safe as possible. And those are our conversations. What is yours? We need to have yours as well.
All right, but we got to get moving, and it's time for some motivation.
Definitely.
All right, so it's time for our eye opener, and our eye opener is taken from dailyom.com, and it goes like this. Grief can arise from many life situations, but no, it is not a permanent state of being. When we experience any kind of devastating loss, whether it is the loss of a loved one, a dream, or a relationship, feelings may arise within us that are overwhelming or difficult to cope with. This sense of grief can also come up when we are separated from anyone or anything we have welcomed into our lives. And while it may feel like we are caught up in a never-ending spiral of sadness and emptiness, it is important to remember that the grief we are feeling is not a permanent state of being. Rather, grief is a part of the process of letting go that in many ways can be a gift, allowing us deeper within ourselves to rediscover the light amidst the seeming darkness. Know that while the hurt may fade, the essence of what you had and who you loved will have already transformed you and forever stay with you. If anything, once you're ready for the pain of your loss to subside, their memories can then live more fully within you. Remember that healing is a part of the spiraling cycles of grief, and that in letting yourself feel restored again, you are surrendering to a natural movement that is part of the dance of life.
This says it all. It says it all. Rather, grief is part of the process of letting go that in many ways can be a gift. Marlene, this happens every day. There are people who grieve loved ones. They were in a relationship. I love that it pointed out so many aspects of, and realistic aspects, exactly what we go through on a daily basis. Whether family or friends, you've been, your heart has been intertwined with somebody's because you fell in love there, but that is no more, or that is no more there, right there, and you grieve. But it says here that rather grief is a part of a process that of letting go, and in many ways can be a gift, because that's exactly what it is. Marlene, we need to understand exactly where it's coming from, because if anything, once you are ready for the pain of your loss to subside, their memories can live more fully within you. My gosh,
That's the part that really stood out to
Yes.
me, because it is key. Once you are ready, that's what we have to remember. And I agree with you. I think that when we talk about grief, people think just loss of life or loss of loved ones, but that's not the only situation. We grieve many things in our lives. We grieve jobs if you lose them. You grieve relationships. You grieve friendships. You grieve pets. You grieve change in situations. It just naturally comes. We always hear the saying, this too will pass. And it is true, but it's not the best thing to tell people. It's not considered, it's not very considerate while they're going through their pain. But for the people who are actually suffering, it is an important realization that they must make, that this is the process of letting go, and that you will naturally find your rhythm as to when you feel yourself feeling lighter and feeling less suffering as you move along. Of course, we must note that from a mental health standpoint, if you find yourself lingering in that pain too long, it is definitely time to reach out for some help.
Yeah, have a conversation. Remember, though, that healing is a part of the spiraling cycle of grief, and that in letting yourself feel restored again, you're surrendering to a natural movement that is part of the dance of life. What a way, what a way.
And from our eye-opener to finding out about our weather, what can we expect for today? We have Michelle Smith Augustin on the line to tell us more. Good morning.
Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning.
It's always nice to hear from you guys, because you guys have got the news, whether it's hot, it's rainy, or it's cold. Let's go to what it is like in the general situation.
All right, warm and mostly dry conditions will continue to prevail over the country.
And what does that say for our 24-hour forecast?
All right, we can expect skies to be sunny during the daytime and partly cloudy at night. Little and no rainfall is expected.
All right. So the winds?
Winds will be out of the east to southeast at about 10 to 20 knots.
Producing what kind of seas there?
Light top sea conditions.
All right. So let's get to the temperatures. How hot or how high and how low will we be feeling those temperatures?
All right, along the coast we can expect about 88 Fahrenheit, inland about 96 Fahrenheit, and up in the hills about 81 Fahrenheit. Tonight will be another warm night. Along the coast we can expect 81 Fahrenheit, inland about 72 Fahrenheit, and up in the hills 66 Fahrenheit.
All right, it's pretty straightforward. All right, so for the next few days in our extended forecast, what should we expect?
All right, for tomorrow we see an increase in temperatures, so we're going for hot, continuing mostly dry, but hot weather conditions. Inland can expect about 99, even 100 degrees tomorrow in the afternoon. Along the coast, about 91 Fahrenheit. And with the excessive heat, we expect the chance of afternoon thunderstorms, primarily over the mountains, though.
Okay. All right. Well, Michelle, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
All right, I'm looking ahead into the weekend. For Friday, we have continuing warm weather. And then for Saturday and Sunday, it looks like there will be a gradual decrease in temperatures. Not much, maybe about a degree or two. So not as hot as today and tomorrow for the weekend.
Right. But we will have some showers with that cold front that will be north of us, right?
Right, yes, we expect from Friday the chance of afternoon thunderstorms as the front approaches the central Gulf. And then Saturday and Sunday, we expect isolated showers. So that's why temperatures are expected to be a little less, extreme.
Okay. All right.
Michelle, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
All right, there we go. I noticed over the past few days, it has been extremely bright out. And I think we need a bright forecast. I'm just messing. But it is a Wednesday, and we've got some conversations lined up for you, actually. We will be chit-chatting primarily. First conversation is going to be with representatives of the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They'll be breaking down a press release they sent out a few days ago. So we'll be chit-chatting about that.
All right, the second part of our show, this particular week is being celebrated as the vaccination week in Americas. We'll be talking to representatives of the vaccination program here in Belize and finding out more about how the vaccination rollout has been going. We're not just talking COVID, we're talking about protecting our little ones and ensuring that they have full protection from preventable diseases.
And in our third segment for this morning, there is a new director for the Belize Zoo. That guy will be joining us this morning. Celso Put will be joining us in our third conversation for this morning. And we need to move on in terms of, we've got our birthday shout out actually. And for this morning, we would like to say a happy birthday to Sorvin Rayburn. Happy birthday to you, sir. All the very best to you, coming from the family and of course from all of us here at Channel 5 and all of us right here on Open Your Eyes. We'll take the break. When we come back, we'll be visited by the Belize Chamber of Commerce. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Currently, we're using Smart Elite VoIP calling plan. We use it interbranch, we use it to call outside, and we also use it to call internationally. It's far cheaper than what we used to have before. Our equipment are new, PBX Max is new. So the PBX is very good because I can call to my Sartaneja branch, I can call to my Kikaka branch, I can call to San Pedro branch, and there's no cost using the PBS. Actually right now, since we're in different locations, I can call main office from where I am at a no cost using the PBX system. I would recommend it, sure I would, especially the big enterprises who has a lot of employees. There's a lot of reduction in costs, 50% of saving. Put that on a year, it's a lot of money that we're saving. Money that we could return to our members, since we give back dividend to our members.
Visit our showroom or call 670-6710 to find out how Smart's corporate plan and PBX systems can benefit your business. Consultation is free.
Hola, Tony.
Hey Kevin, ¿qué onda? ¿Qué pasa?
Nada, le vine a buscar porque necesito comprar más mercancías de vasos y platos desechables para mi tienda de comestible. Me estoy quedando sin esas cosas.
No, hombre, fíjate que desde el 15 de abril no puedo importar nada de eso. Y se me acaba de terminar todo lo que tenía hace como 3 semanas.
Oye, pero nunca has estado sin esas cosas. ¿Qué está pasando?
Mira esto. Esta es la nueva ley que prohíbe todo el uso de plásticos no reutilizables. Esos son vasos, platos, cucharas, tenedores, todo eso. Desde 15 de abril de este año no he podido importar nada de eso. A partir del 15 de enero del 2021 nadie puede fabricarlo. 15 de abril 2021 nadie lo puede vender. Y a partir del 14 de julio del 2021 si alguien te agarra con eso, te multan.
Híjole, no sabía eso. Necesito cambiar algunas cosas. Les diré a mis clientes por qué esas cosas ya no están disponibles. Gracias, Antonio.
Así es, cuídate, man.
Available now at Bravo Motors. As one of the largest cable and internet providers in Belize, CBC strives to provide our customers with the highest standards of quality, value, and service in all aspects of cable TV and internet. Monitoring our systems closely, our technicians combine creative planning and state-of-the-art technology with years of experience and training to develop and provide the most reliable and advanced cable and internet service to exceed your expectations. For CBC and our team of talented engineers, technicians, and customer service representatives, delivering less than the very best is never an option.
Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're moving now into our first segment, and this one is going to be a conversation with reps from the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry. As a matter of fact, in with us this morning is Marcelo Blake. He is the Vice President of the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also Dion Elliott, who is the Chief Policy Analyst at BCCI. Gentlemen, a very pleasant morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Marlene. Good morning, John. Thanks for having us.
Good morning. It's always nice to have you guys in. I think we're at the right point to make some discussions, but primarily for me, I'd like to firstly point out that a few days ago, the Belize Chamber of Commerce and Industry issued their press release with respect to what the unions and GOB are going through, and was adamant about, you know what, you guys need to get back to the table. So primarily, let's break down the press release so people could understand what it's talking about, and then we move on from there. Marcelo?
All right. Thanks, John. Well, thanks again. Our press release really is geared towards trying to help the process along, getting everybody back at the table for the discussions to continue. Our goal here in that entire process is to be able to let level heads enter the room because it's very politically and emotionally driven at this time. Because at the end of the day, the only persons that can benefit are the people and the country as a whole. As we've stated in that press release, and if I could just share one short paragraph from it, it says, as we stated earlier this year, and we had done a press release back in February after the budget consultation, while the economy may need the preservation of as much spending power as possible to help the speedy recovery, at the same time, it must also acknowledge that Belize's fiscal space is especially constrained. These are inescapable realities, the solution to which cannot be found if negotiations break down. And so at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the conversations continue and that in fact there can be some kind of resolution, solution, or meeting of the minds on some of those critical areas that will help us to, as a country, rebound and move forward. None of us planned for COVID, and so with the impact of COVID coupled with what has been spending this, going back many, many years, different administrations where we have been spending to the extent that we are beyond where we should be as a country. I mean, 133% of GDP debt is significant. Bringing that home to the regular household, it just means that you are 33% extended beyond what it is that you earn, that you can actually spend, which means that you are constantly borrowing. And at some point, that's going to tap out, because we all know if we are in this and we, as an individual, we're going to the bank and we need extended financing. We have a mortgage, we have personal loans to send the kids to school, and now we're in a position where we need additional funds for home improvements, as an example. We go to the bank will look at our finances and see what's your income, what are all your expenses, utilities, food bill, all of that, and then determine whether or not we are viable for extended credit. If it is that we are beyond a certain level of extension, then we become a risk, which then means they will possibly lend us, but they'll lend us at a much higher rate. And in the case of where they decide not to lend us, then where do we turn to? And we as a country are slowly getting to that point where, as we look to borrow on the international market, there will be persons who will say, you're too risky for us to have extend any additional credit to. And then there are others who would possibly lend us, but the question is at what premium? What would we as a people have to pay back?
Yeah. You know, I love that you're trying to break it down to an example where people within their households can really understand. We have heard from many different stakeholders about the gravity of our economic situation. I want to hear just your perspective as the private sector. You play such a critical role in keeping the economy going. And as you have noted, COVID was, you know, I've called it a sledgehammer of sorts to most businesses, but also where we were before that, where we'd already seen 4 quarters of decline. We were already, as many would say, in a recession.
Want me to take that one, Marcelo, or?
Jump in, man.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think the macroeconomic situation, I think, has been basically discussed at length over the last couple of months. And so I don't believe there's much need to reiterate too many of those points, except to highlight certain things that are not frequently discussed. John, earlier you were saying you saw another program where I was on yesterday. The president and myself were on the Business Perspective Show, which is a show that is hosted by the Chamber of Commerce, and we talked about this as well, where the Belizean economy is what you call a medium-high vulnerable economy. And because of the time constraints that we have this morning, what that means is that you're more exposed to exogenous shocks, what we economists like to call exogenous shocks, things that happen outside of your economy's control that have a ramification on what happens to you here. And usually there are some natural environment stuff like climate change. There is the fact that we're dependent on a very narrow basket of goods and services exports, like tourism, for example, that brings in 60% of your foreign reserves. And then you have this a narrow export destination. Oh yes, yes, I forgot you guys have that thing in studio. Well, for those watching by TV, then you have we're reliant on strategic imports. So you're talking about your energy imports, your oil, your gasoline, that type of stuff. You rely on food imports. You rely on intermediate inputs as imports. And then you have social susceptibility, which, as you're seeing, that is measured one part in by crime, homicide rate. And all of these things make you a vulnerable economy. So that when the CDC headquarters in the United States says that there is a no-sail order on cruise lines, none of them comes to your shore, and you end up with massive unemployment in the cruise sector. Mm-hmm. When you have to close your airport, you have basically no tourists coming for a long period of time, and then you have a trickle coming back. And every so often, the US government goes and issue an advisory that kind of messes things up. So, since you guys are showing the graph, there is a page 3 of it, or slide 3 of it. There is a graph that I had put together. And I won't get into the technicalities here, but what this does is plots Belize's, or countries, this is 85 countries' vulnerability next to the speed of forecasted recovery that the IMF has forecasted for countries. Traditionally, vulnerability theory says, that theory, actually it's been studied over the years, that the more vulnerable the economy is, you tend to grow slower because international world market prices affect you, natural disasters affect you, XYZ. Those same vulnerabilities are pulling down the speed at which we could recover. All I will say here is you look at that downward line, that's a downward trend. So basically the higher vulnerability, you have relatively and all things being equal, a slower recovery. That's without any protest, that's without any COVID, that's without anything that needs to be considered. So by definition, we're already an economy that's starting at what the vernacular would say on the bad foot. An economy is held up by businesses. Businesses are the ones that employs people. They are the one that creates revenue. Government gets revenue from economic activity. So if your economy is down by 14% in 2020, which when you rank it in order to decline, Belize has the 16th steepest decline out of 194 countries in the world. So we're in a very, very bad place. And one of the things that we are looking at here is that while we're in a very, very bad place, there's a line from a song that I like. It says, there's a line in where the guy says, show me where it hurts so I can make it worse. We don't need anything right now that should make it worse. If we talk about doing business reform, the government, this current government is rightly talking about doing business reform, but a majority of the business reform requires partnership with the public sector. So if you have striking people in government that you need to go to when you have to start a business, you need to go to when you want to pay taxes, you need to go to when you want to register property, and trading across borders, you need to go to government agencies. And if you run the risk of having go slow or any type of industrial action, you're potentially going to make an economic recovery that's already slow by nature, possibly being even slower. And so from the business community standpoint, we're saying we need to get cooler heads to return to the table. I'm happy to say that the NTUCB also put out a press release calling for the same thing, saying that we need to get back to the negotiating table. Because from a business standpoint, that's going to be harsh.
And that's one of the things I wanted to get a reaction on, just the recent news. When you're quoting NTUCB, meanwhile, we have the Public Service Union saying that they feel that there's no more consultation to be held. They've also announced that they're moving into strike action on Monday.
Yeah, well, that's internal. That's internal to them. I don't understand the internal structures and relationships between the NTUCB, the PSU, and the BNT.
No, but differentiating how the NTUCB falls under the umbrella organization of the NTUCB is one thing. But from a business perspective, when you look at the implications of the public service going on strike, or when you have union leaders saying, we are not going back to the table, this is really an alarming situation. Would you agree?
Of course. I think that's kind of what I was outlining just now, that there's very few business processes that don't require businessmen and women to have to pass through a government office.
Yeah.
So if you have, we talk efficiency requires the public sector role in this as well. You want to talk about tax collections? It's not the ministers that are going to go out and do the tax collection that's been evaded, It's going to be the same public officers, right? And so in the end of the day, this is not helpful.
Yeah.
We are in, I used the analogy yesterday, we're all in one boat, and sometimes it comes across as if we have to be careful that we're not digging holes, and this is true for all stakeholders. We're not digging holes into the boat, making the water that's coming in even faster.
Yeah.
Sorry, Marcella, I think we're about to say something.
No, I'm just saying that from the strike action standpoint, yes. Everything that businesses do always has a link into the public sector, and so it is important that we come back to the table, and that's the reason why I opened with that, because if that occurs, then it may slow business even further. We are in a position where we're struggling as a business community, trying to keep things afloat, trying to ensure that business continues, ensuring that we can supply the goods and services for the end consumer. But if that slows even further, and apologies, but it's already slow, so if it slows further, it's a stop. Then what happens to us as a country? It's not looking at it from a business community standpoint only, but as a country, then everything stops. The other thing we don't consider is all of these actions that we're doing. Yes, we want to make sure that there's fair conversations at the table, but the international community is watching as well. And so at the end of the day, these things will have a rippling effect, and not today, but down the road.
And we are in the midst of attempting to restructure the debt as well, which is a critical part in the recovery. Now, the chamber has been very clear. You're not picking sides on this. In fact, you volunteered to be a mediator in the process. Has either side picked up on this request as yet?
Not formally, at least.
Okay.
If I can say it like that. One of the things that, sometimes you see things in the media, it always looks like the private sector and the unions and the busy side fighting, but we have very cordial conversations when the cameras are off, Just throwing this out there, the USH committee, while we hear a lot of things in the news about USH, for example, I have been one of the representatives, the private sector representative on the USH working committee, and I have to tell you, we have had months of meetings with representatives from the unions on that thing, and we work very well together. Of course, anyway, when the cameras comes on, for some reason it seems differently, no? But right, so informally, to my knowledge, no. But I can tell you there are other stakeholders. I won't get into that, but I can tell you just yesterday evening there are other social partner stakeholders that are looking on, that are agreeing with the position for cooler heads to prevail. But I can't get into the details of that as yet. Yeah. So there is that. Marlene and John, you know, one of the things that I think we have to agree on is that what's happening to Belize right now is that everybody is looking at the same problem, but from different points of views. And there's a vision over what the solution should be. And one of the analogies I like to use is in a medical field. In the medical field, if you go to a doctor and you're sick, you have certain symptoms, the doctor may come to you with multiple treatment options. Basically, they might put all the reasonable things on the table, and then you have to decide. And so one of the recommendations that you saw from our February letter was that we were saying to GOB from back then, this is a serious situation. These are all these things that are on the table. Nothing should be off the table, and it's necessary for us to weigh all those options, and when the numbers are in, to decide which one is most beneficial, and we go with that. And if at the end of the day that exercise is done, and you find out that, okay, the cut is inevitable, then we will not stand in your way. That is what our letter basically says, right? And we can get into discussions about what those prescriptions could be, but the fundamental point is that that's what the letter was trying to allude to.
The narrative coming from the government side is one, and if we stick with medical analogies, you know, it's if you're hemorrhaging, before you can get to the point of whether it's repairing the damage that's done, you got to stop the bleeding. And with the continuous borrowing that takes place to be able to even meet salary payments, they're saying this is one way we don't have to bleed as much. Are there any immediate actions, recommendations coming out from the private sector, or do you also agree that urgent actions must be taken to cut down on the extent of borrowing?
Well, I don't know if Marcelo wanted to take that one first, but...
Well, you've been crunching the numbers, you know, so you start and then he continues.
Well, here's the thing. We do not want to come out as a chamber with a specific position.
Yeah.
People who know me on the side knows I have my own personal views, but I'm here representing an organization this morning, so I will speak the organizational point of view. Our position is that there are many options that are on the table, and there are some that we're noticing that are not on the table. I'll give you one example, like just literally one example that has been out there. Using the phrase hemorrhaging. Here's the problem. Belize is an economy that relies on a certain level of international reserves. Yes. We all know ultimately that ties to our pay. The government rightfully says they can't continue printing money the way they're doing for for wages and salaries, because it will leak out as imports, which increase import demand. So because of the desk that I manage at the Chamber of Commerce, which is the Governance and Trade Division, my mind went immediately from months ago, well, in trade laws that exist, there are provisions expressly designed for times like these. There's a thing known as restrictions for balance of payment safeguards. With balance of payments, basically, in a nutshell, we can talk about what's happening with your reserve, if it's going down too fast, blah, blah, blah. In the WTO rules under the GATT, there's an Article 18. You guys are journalists. You can always go cross-check it for me if you want. It's there. Article 18 of the GATT, the General Agreement of Tariff and Trade, also gives you that provision. Ecuador used it back in 2015 to 2017 when their monthly import cover was all the way down below 2 months. Belize is still above 3. As a matter of fact, we're about 5.3 according to the central bank, and IMF says you're at 4.3. IMF, under the baseline scenario, says that you won't have a problem until 2024, but it's still a crisis brewing. So there is one option that I have not heard officially that is on the table, which is a simple, it's not simple. It's an Article 18 provision activation that would do several things. You are allowed now under the WTO rules to implement a certain import surcharge on non-essential imports to help you do two things simultaneously: increase government revenue, at the same time reducing import demand if you do it right. Administration-wise, there's going to be a concern. Again, another reason why we need the public officers to be on the same page, because right, if we're not even at the table, we can't even discuss these options. All right. And so what I'm saying, and that's just one example that should be on the table that we haven't heard being placed on the table. And clearly, like I quoted Ecuador just now. When Ecuador used this back in 2015 to 2017, they raised over 1.5 US billion dollars on this particular measure.
Wow.
The IMF knows about it because, and interestingly, they come to us and they will recommend increasing GST, increasing excise, lowering income taxes, but they never ever mention this particular provision. Even though, if you read the understanding on this particular provision, the IMF is an integral part of this process, so they are aware.
Yeah.
But in a world where the religion is about trade liberalization and whatever, they will never tell that to you directly. So it's up to you to now think beyond what is being advised to you out of Washington, D.C. You have to, because now at the same time, we have a debt crisis brewing. And Minister Chris Coy, to his credit, is also joining the clarion call in calling for debt relief, which I think you guys have discussed before in the show, so there's no point in raising that here. So all I'm saying is cuts off the table? Of course not.
No.
Are revenue enhancement measures on the table? They can't be taken off. But we have to be able to get the technocrats and everybody in the room with cool heads to crunch the numbers and see which one will lead to the most benefit and which one can be discarded. And that cannot happen in this type of environment where people obviously are shouting over each other as opposed to talking to each other.
Yeah, you know, I must say that as you outlined that, I can agree that this has been a message coming out from the private sector for quite a while. Your past president, in fact, I think had noted this as a possible solution. It was worded differently. It wasn't looking at just taxes on imports, but ensuring that local players had more access to the market than all the things that we are importing. But we have an example to go off. When the conversation started with a particular brand of milk, the country went in an uproar over it. And it goes to the core of what is the issue here. There are tough decisions to be made, but then there's also dealing with or preparing for the public reaction and sentiment. What are your thoughts?
It comes back to the balance of payment conversation that Dion mentioned earlier, which is, so if you're not able to find the foreign currency for those imports, the question is, what do you start to limit? And that was one action of trying to steer the local consumption back to local production and pushing for industry and agri to be more at the forefront, which we've seen since the pandemic and the borders being closed, increase quite significantly compared to what it was pre-COVID.
And you have to understand, you have to understand, guys, that this is, I don't know if I should wear, you know what, it's the facts. I shouldn't have any hesitation in saying the facts.
Don't hesitate. Open our eyes.
Basically what we're doing, look at what the international structures of our economy is doing. This is not a Belizean problem. The other developing countries are facing this as well. We are forced to choose between preserving our international reserve levels because we have a peg, and choose between that, whether or not we grow faster or we keep our very slow, meager growth. Now, we talk growth and we talk GDP, but behind GDP, that's people. That's another family, as Minister Curdell Head was saying, that's another family member who have to question how you can feed the family. That's another employer who have to sit down and numbers crunch and think, oh my God, how am I keep the lights on tomorrow? That's another rent that can't be paid. That's another mortgage that's on the line of worrying about what's going to happen in the future. There's people behind these numbers. And sometimes I feel that the economic field, we get so bogged down into numbers that we forget that this is a social science about people at the end of the day. And so if you're having to choose between growing your economy at a certain speed or between, we have to find a way, there have to be other options out there. I just gave you one. And that's from a trade perspective. You have monetary economists, you have financial economists, you have trade economists, you have different branches of economists. These people need to be thrown into a room, lock the door. I want to give an yourself the whole weekend, and I don't want to come out until I come with something, but make sure that I am not causing my people to go hungry while at the same time still protecting what I need to protect. And I am saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek because of time constraints. But what I'm trying to get to here is that there are options that need to be on the table for us to trash them out and run the numbers.
Yeah. You know, you said something, I think, which is the core of the matter. When we talk about these issues, we are talking about the impact on families. Let's proceed, and I'm not asking you, I hear very clearly the Chamber does not want to give a position on which side they feel is addressing this problem best. But for all intents and purposes, from what we've seen, debate presentations, the speak coming out of government, the salary cuts are going to proceed. Now, economists have said as well, there's actually going to be an immediate slowdown that happens after that. Do you want to put that into perspective?
Yeah. That is the perspective. That is the fact. I mean, it doesn't matter.
I mean, for the rest of us to help understand, once you have less money to spend, you buy less,
yes.
The businesses make less. How does this help in the long run?
In the short run, you're going to have a slowdown. There's no two ways about that. And the only let me quote the IMF. See, Marcelo is the safe territory. This is the IMF. The IMF tells you, the IMF, not the elected chamber, that if there's a document that guides on how to manage public sector wage cuts. So if you're going to go that route, which you kind of said, Marlene, is kind of already in the budget, that there's a 4-point criteria that you want to follow. If you guys want, I can send you the link to this particular document I'm quoting afterwards. But it says that if you're going to cut, it should be progressive, meaning that low-income people are less affected than the higher-income people. Mm-hmm. That it should be targeted, which means that you're carving out the frontline workers. That these measures were also mentioned in our February letter, by the way, because we were kind of quoting from this from back then. It has to be temporary, and this is where a huge debate come up what temporary means, if it's like the Barbados boss bond where they gave them a boss bond and then they could claim it back eventually. And then finally, to make sure that you don't drop in what economics call aggregate demand, which if you take our principles of economics course, you know that's very tied to GDP growth. To not have that fall, if you're taking the money from Peter, you need to transfer it over to poor Paul in stimulus programs, into households, into wage subsidies, into unemployment relief programs, into food support, into economic stimulus for business community. Those things, the money taken over one side should be put placed somewhere else. That is what the IMF guide on cutting salaries is basically telling you should do. Because the idea there behind their thinking is that low-income households have what we refer to in economic parlance as a higher marginal propensity to consume, meaning that low-income households will spend the money as opposed to sit it in a bank and save it somewhere. And that therefore that could increase your economic demand or aggregate demand and help a little bit to speed up or at least not cause your economic recovery to slow down, but at least grow at least at that 1.92%. And if we can come out of this lucky, at least at 3 or 4. So that is the thinking from the IMF. So again,
well, we haven't heard the tiered approach seems to have been rejected by the unions. That was the 8, 10, and 12% based on income bracket. Minister Usher outlined on Monday that it's not about saving money to spend it in another area. It's about no longer borrowing to be able to pay. So it's not holding on to money. It's not borrowing money. So, from any of the other 4 criteria, have you heard any communication coming out from our government that fall in line with that? Those are 2 examples.
I feel like I've been hugging the mic, so I'll leave that to Marcelo.
I think you're worried about sharing your personal opinion. But go ahead, Marcelo.
There's not been much that we've heard coming out that we could speak to. I think at the end of the day, we just need to make sure, as I've started out saying, that we bring the players back to the table. Because at the end of the day, if we're not in the same conversation or there's no conversation, then what happens at the end of the day, everybody will suffer. The entire country and people will suffer.
And I think that is exactly, at this particular point, because of nobody or no negotiations going on, it seems that that is exactly where we are actually headed. Now, Marcelo, again, Marlene had asked the question, So anybody picked up on these negotiations and being mediated by the BCCI? Anything from there?
Nothing officially, as Dion said earlier. There's been conversations behind closed doors in unofficial circles, but we wait and see. I mean, the release is a few days old, so we will wait and see what will happen. But at the same time, the Chamber continues on its drive to ensure that we keep our members informed and keep the public informed as best we can. I'd just like to plug in here that we have our annual AGM on Thursday. It's 101st, and so again at that meeting we'll be sharing as much information with our members. We have the Prime Minister being the keynote speaker at that event, and so we are optimistic that he will give us some information that we've not heard prior, particularly on the economic recovery side and how we can earn additional revenues, because we've constantly been having the conversation, as Dion said, on the expense side and the cutting, but we've not heard a whole lot about how we will generate new revenue. You know, looking at it from the analogy I gave earlier of the individual, if it is that the bank tells you no, then maybe it is that you need to get a second job, a second part-time job, to be able to still meet your expenditures. And so it's that second and third and fourth and fifth job that we need to hear about as a business community, and how we can help in that exercise and foster the growth that is necessary for all of us to survive.
If I may add here, because I know the time is winding down. A lot of times we get into these conversations and it's government versus somebody else type of thing. The Belizean general public have a massive role to play in all of this too, you know. Because remember, the government is faced with a balance of payment crisis because of our appetite for imports.
Yeah.
We can't escape that. So at some point, we need to take possibly a nationalist position and say, you know what, as much as I can support local, I will support local. Because we need to try and preserve jobs, and that's in the hands of the man and woman in the household, right? And we need to look out for each other in that kind of way. If I go to a store and I see Fabuloso on a shelf and I see Green Clean on a shelf, which one will I choose? One of them is local, one of them I understand is imported. So just to put that out there, and that's choices that we can make. Everybody could help in this process, not just Delma Pan.
You know, I mean, I think once upon a time there was the Buy Belize, Build Belize campaign, which I can remember. And you know, it's the messaging that helps us solidify what your role is in being able to help the country grow. But before we really run out of time, well, I do want to get into some of the possible options. And you mentioned it briefly there, Dion, when you talked about what's happening in Barbados and their boss bonds, as they're called. This is, you know, Prime Minister Motley has been innovative in some of her solutions. What are your thoughts on options like these for our public servants as a way forward?
Well, I think it's, again, remember my knowledge earlier, I said everything should be on the table, right? That's one of them that should be on the table. The thinking of the government is that that's just increasing the debt. Again, there's a trade-off on every end you turn. So on the one end, you can shave off about 3 percentage points off of your overall debt to GDP, which, by the way, I have to mention, one of the things that bothers me is that, of course, our debt to GDP will be higher relatively to where it was before, because the GDP part of it, which is the denominator, has gotten smaller. So if you go back to basic maths, if your numerator are roughly the same or a little bit bigger, and your denominator comes smaller, of course, the quotient will be larger. And that's why it's always been so sad that both the UDP and the PUP politicized this entire crisis. We had a drought in 2019, we had COVID in 2020, that has pushed us over the ledge. We can get into a healthy conversation about resilience another time, because that is the other half of the coin. But the boss bond type of structure, there is some use to that being on the table, whether or not you are being for the full 10% or some small fraction. That is where the negotiation comes in. That's where the conversation has to come in. Do we go with the Article 18 of the GATT? We run the numbers, we get the Ministry of Finance, we get the central bank economists on the team, we get our whatever, we run the numbers that we compare and contrast, and we have rational, objective conversation. Do we cut salaries? That is obviously on the table. That ought not be taken off the table. That has to be weighed. Not even the APSSM has said that should be off the table. But they're all considering there's a comprehensive. But let me say like this. This is a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. So you can't have run-of-the-mill thinking. We need once-in-a-lifetime thinking. We need once-in-a-lifetime solutions. This is not the time to be running with the business as usual. You guys were putting up a slide just now that I was quoting from a document from the World Bank. The World Bank in that document, I'm just pointing out the document here, Governance, COVID-19 Response Managing. You guys, I encourage you to look up that document because in there they say a lot of things about even the standard menu is basically useless right now. This has never happened to us before. There is no economic model that has been able to explain what's happening here.
No historical data that can be relied on.
There is none.
Ultimately, there are no easy decisions in how we move forward. And I think that's one that we all have to come to terms with. But and you mentioned the APSSM, which is something that I also wanted to touch on. What we've heard from different union leaders, the message changes a bit. Some are saying definitively no salary cut. Some are saying, well, you know, it's dependent on the good governance measures that we see. We cannot lose sight of at least the principle of where this particular industrial action period started. It was not just about looking at salaries. It was about the fact that there is a mistrust in our government systems that is long before this particular administration, and the fact that the unions are saying, as they did in 2016, we must make a stand now to see the type of structure put in place that we can circumvent some of the things that we usually see take place. The Chamber has been a very active voice and, in fact, a member of the rollout of UNCAC since it was signed in 2016. What are your thoughts on the principled portion of the stance that the unions are making?
I will refer you back to our letter, but I see Marcelo is going there.
Go ahead, Marcelo.
Yeah, no, the principle of it is something that we as the Chamber support, because at the end of the day, good governance is important in any society, and it also creates a certain level of predictability. It also allows us to ensure that we safeguard the assets for the people, because at the end of the day, the assets aren't for any one administration, it is for the people on a whole. And if we don't safeguard them, then what would be left for our children?
Valid point. And again, I mean, we have been on record calling for years, several of these measures in partnership with the unions. If you look at the Chamber Manifesto, for example, we have a whole section on anti-corruption. Our letter, we even referred back to the cost-saving measures, because if you, maybe I should quote quickly from the letter, we listed some of these things in our letter from the February letter I'm referring to, and we said actually that these things should precede, the conversation on the cuts or any other measures that exist. Right? It says, aside from the wage bill, there are other measures that we believe should precede any cut and would yield far greater returns to government's fiscal position. So earlier I was talking about one measure that can, create new revenue and slow down the import demand and the balance payments issue. But then there's this long-standing issue of tax evasion that the Chamber of Commerce, and we should say it here, has been on the record saying that needs to be addressed for donkey's years. So sometimes I have to say, the broad brush that comes against us in the private sector, the private sector needs to do their part. We need to start being a little bit more surgical with those comments, because we have a code of ethics for our members that we expect certain things of Chamber members. But the Chamber, there are over 10,000 businesses in this country. The Chamber doesn't represent all of them, so I'll leave it at that. And so we on our end have been saying this matter is a problem and we need it fixed in various ways, in various forums. We have been calling for this. And so we are agreeing with the principled position. We are only saying now that this breakdown is the worst thing you can think about doing to an economy that is already, like a drop in our hole by, I talk in Creole, I practice it lately. You're dropping our hole.
You're not in the house, you're fine.
you're dropping our hole by 14 feet. And right now, the IMF will tell you probably might creep out by 2 feet. But then some of the actions they're doing is going to question even that 2 feet climb out. Right? That is, and again, keeping people unemployed longer, keeping hungry bellies hungry longer. there's a macroeconomic picture that we have to consider, and all stakeholders, whether it's government, whether it's unions, whether it's the private sector, the average Joe and Jane, we all have a role to play in this.
Wow. And what about, you're heading into your AGM tomorrow, actually, right? And you are going to be having the keynote address from the Prime Minister. Looking at the past year, how have your members fared off? Have you seen business closures? What's the assessment that Chamber has made at this point?
Definitely there's been closures. Businesses have had to make the difficult decision of not only releasing staff, but even cutting wages as well to be able to maintain business at least afloat. Yeah. And some have actually resorted to some level of borrowing to at least be able to keep the lights on, but that can only be sustained in a very short, over a short span of time. And I guess that's the reason, well, not guess, but I know that's the reason why we have seen some closures. It's unfortunate because with those closures means that we're adding to the unemployment, apart from that coming from tourism very early. Yeah. And so the question is, so how do we then support those persons from the government standpoint to be able to, one, get back into gainful employment, and if not, would there be any kind of stimulus packages to assist them, yeah, both from a survival standpoint and from securing new employment? Yeah. Yeah. And hence the reason I said earlier, there's a conversation on one side about cutting, but there's not a lot being said on the opposite side of how we generate new business, new revenue, and putting people back into employment so that we can get out of this position at a faster rate than is being projected by the IMF with this 2%.
Marlene and John, I know I'm the guest, but can I ask a question to you guys?
I'll decide if I'll answer.
Clever answer, Marlene. But Marcella said something about new business ideas, right? Mm-hmm. So your cruise tourism industry basically goes unconscious. You look at countries like Germany and whatnot, and you find things like virtual tourism being done aggressively to try and make up that shortfall. From you guys in the media, have you seen anybody in Belize moving that direction from the stories you've been covering? Isn't that an innovative thing that we should be considering?
I think we've heard of it. I have heard of virtual tourism, but it's definitely something that people have been skeptical about because we don't necessarily know at this particular point how to move it forward.
And that's where you get your experts in the room. You have people with brilliant ideas. Yeah. I've had conversations with people in the sector. And I didn't just pose that without having talked to people. Yeah. There are people in the sector that has not only thought of this idea, but have actually promulgated it. Yeah. And it seems to be falling on a majority, mass deaf ears. And that's just one example. And that's just one. I mean, yeah, you get a bunch of business people in a room and you start coming up with other ideas that can be adjusted for this new normal. Yeah. That will gain you foreign exchange. Go check out what essenceofberlin.com is doing. I mean, these guys have tours that they're offering for 79 euros per tour.
The museums have put their art on display as well. You can check out world famous artwork online for a fee as well.
There you go. So that's bringing in some money.
The challenge here, and I'm not posing a problem. I think one of the things that happens is, and we've heard it so much, there needs to be an innovative approach to how we're going to get out of this. But when the burden is so heavy, perhaps it's because the government themselves, they know what they're facing in their individual ministries. Should there be, whether it's a bipartisan and including stakeholders, just a group of people who will come together, not just government representatives, who will help to hammer out some details as to how we move forward out of where we are today.
Well, we're waiting on a report from the Economic Recovery Advisory Team. So I believe that was this government's version of that what you just described.
Yeah, but it is also a small group and not as representative as many would want it to be.
Yeah, I personally could agree with that. But, and again, you can note that the Chamber did not have official representation as an organization on that committee. Mm-hmm. This is a point that we have raised and voiced directly to the government, but we're giving time to the new government to get into its role and do what it has to do. But I agree with you, Marlene, that there's definitely, this is one of those times where all the king's men, all the king's forces need to have been called in. All right, that's what that little nursery rhyme was trying to teach us for a time like this. Right?
Well.
So this is not even the time for the politicking that we've been seeing. We need to get everybody on board.
And lastly, as we quickly run out of time, has the Chamber discussed the idea of subscribing to the IMF programs, if you'd make that recommendation?
You mean the standby arrangement?
Yes.
No, we have not. That, not to my knowledge. Marcelo is in the EC. Maybe that's been discussed there, but
No, that hasn't been a consideration. And I personally, I don't think we're there yet. There's so many other options to be considered that need to be considered first before we subscribe to the standby arrangement.
All right. Well, guys, thank you so very much for breaking it down for us. And we do hope that these negotiations actually get back to the table being mediated by the BCCI. Thank you, and do enjoy your day, both of you.
okay, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, we're about to take a break. When we come back, we'll be discussing Vaccination Week in the Americas. We're actually at day 3. We'll talk about that when we come back. Stay with us.
Working off-site doesn't mean you have to be off your game. Studies have shown that simply adding a keyboard and mouse to your laptop increases productivity by 26%. Add a monitor and you'll be 35% more productive. At Fulltech Systems, we have what you need to enhance your remote work or e-learning experience. With devices such as headsets, video conferencing monitors, webcams, keyboards, mice, docking stations, all with the brands you trust. Keep connected with collaboration tools like Microsoft 365 Suite and Kaspersky and perform efficiently no matter where you are. Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
In these challenging times, the one thing that is certain is that the Belize Bank Limited is here for you. There is nothing more important than your health and safety, and we continue to make every effort to make banking safer for you. Our staff is working around the clock to make sure you can do your banking conveniently 24/7 using our mobile banking app and online banking and keeping ATMs up and running. We value your relationship with us and are here to provide the support you need. First responders are also out there 24/7. Thank you, healthcare workers, security forces, firefighters, caregivers. You are all appreciated. Stay safe. We will get through this together. The Belize Bank, our country, your bank.
Gender-based violence is not just a woman's issue. It is a human rights issue. Women and children should not feel unsafe in their own homes where they should feel the safest. Let us fight against all forms of violence.
Dwayne Moody, Isani Cayetano, Andrea Polanco, Paul Lopez. Your News 5 Belize teams do whatever it takes, go wherever they need to go, so you can catch the story wherever you are, whenever you want, on whatever device. Channel 5 Belize on television, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, because news is now everywhere, all the time. And so are we.
Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're moving now into our second segment. As we mentioned earlier, that this week is actually being celebrated as Vaccination Week in the Americas, actually the 19th one. And we've got the representatives in to share with us what the week is all about. All courtesy Fulltech Systems. This is our COVID-19 update. In with us, we've got Nurse Rosalva Blanco, who is a quality assurance nurse, and Nurse Lilia Middleton, who is the manager, expanded program of immunization. Good morning and welcome to both of you.
Good morning. Morning. Thanks for having us.
It's always nice to have you guys in. Let's talk about it. Vaccination in the Americas. That's what we're celebrating this week. Talk to us. How and why did this get started?
Okay. Vaccination in the Americas started in 2003 because there was an outbreak of measles in Venezuela and Colombia. So the authorities got together and they decided to work as a team to eliminate this disease that was in the region.
Mm-hmm. And what does this mean for us? What does this week, especially, what does this mean for the country?
This means that we focus more on vaccination, although we have been focusing on vaccination for a long time. Since 1977, the EPI program started in Belize. And so we have been looking at all the diseases that can be transmitted and that can be, that vaccination can assist with these diseases. So we look at these diseases and we work towards eliminating these diseases or getting them under control. So vaccination, we look more and start finding those persons that are not vaccinated, that are not fully vaccinated, and those persons that need to be vaccinated, we go and look for them and try to encourage them to get their vaccination.
You said something very important there. For those who are not fully vaccinated, what is being fully vaccinated? Can you break that down for us?
Fully vaccinated means that you have all the vaccines that are required to protect you against a certain disease. So for example, with the BCG, you only need one vaccine, and that is given at birth. For polio, you need subsequent vaccines. So you start with one injection at 2 months, you get one at 4 months, you get one at 6 months, then you need boosters. You get one at 18 months, you get one at 4 years. So, and then you're classified as fully vaccinated. Now with the COVID vaccine, you need 2 vaccines so that you are fully vaccinated, that you are protected fully.
Nurse Blanco, there are people who are totally against vaccine. And what would you say? What would you say to these people? Because we know for a fact that when it comes to vaccine, how important it is across our country. Why do you feel people are against this?
I believe that people don't like some of the side effects or the reactions that a vaccine could cause. I take it personally when you look at a child that you have to vaccinate, like for example, that Nurse Milton said a while ago, for a baby, a newborn, that you give them the BCG that's against the tuberculosis. All right. Yes, there is a little sore that is formed there. Nobody wants to see a child with a reaction, but it is important for them to understand that when you see that, that means that the medication or the vaccine is being effective, as well as now, presently, as we are vaccinating for the COVID. A lot of people are so reluctant to it because probably they are not fully sensitized in regards to the effect it will have in their body, in their system, and how it will be, how effective it will be on the longer run. Again, with all these vaccines, you get fully immunized or fully vaccinated, so that at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that we cannot have it again. We can have COVID, but we have to understand that because of the vaccine, we are allowing our body to build up antibodies so that we can have a resistance to fight it in the event we would get it again. And that goes across the board for adults, for children, and anybody that gets a vaccine.
Now, Belize has had a very good record of immunization over the years. Do you want to tell us a bit about that and why you think that parents are so open and eager to get their children vaccinated in Belize?
We have a very strong immunization program going, and most of the time our vaccination rates are very high, except for last year, which has shown a decrease in vaccination. Our country has seen that we do not have diseases that these vaccines prevent. So we have for the last years, we haven't had a case of polio from 1981, a case of measles from 1991, congenital rubella syndrome 1997. Tetanus, we haven't had a case since 1997 also, and rubella since 2001. Yeah. So our Belizean people are very, very good when it comes to vaccination, and we have a very a team that works very well and works hard, and they are committed to the vaccination program. So whenever there is someone that is not fully vaccinated, that team will go out and look for those persons that are not vaccinated. So they're into the vaccination program. So that is why Belize has always been there with the vaccination program. They have always have a very good coverage with the vaccination.
It's about 90, it's over 95, right? Or vaccination
yes,
coverage?
95. Most of the time we meet the target, which is 95%. Except as I said, for last year.
I was going to ask, last year, was it just because of the movements, or people started to develop hesitation?
No, we would say it was because of the pandemic, and because people were afraid to come to the health centers or the hospitals to get vaccinated, because of the lockdown also that we had. So people weren't coming in as much as they were coming in before. And also because of the services, we had scaled down of the services. Yeah. So persons weren't coming out, and we weren't going out as we should have been going out to give the vaccination.
I think we didn't have a grip of exactly how to deal with COVID-19, and I think that's one of the reasons, or the reason why you guys weren't out there. But we're celebrating this week, the 19th week actually, throughout the Americas. What are we doing to celebrate here at home?
Okay, for us here in Belmopan, we have a week of activities. Of course, one being vaccinating and going out to the areas that we have experienced more reluctance, in the sense that because of the COVID, they didn't come out, so we're maximizing on those areas. And also for Friday, we're having an activity at the Civic Center where we're calling all the those on the phase 3 and 4 to come out to get vaccinated, especially with the COVID, and also for those that are due immunization for the children, also to be out at the Civic Center to get vaccinated. We're hoping that we can get a good response from the public, and so we already have a program in place for that day.
We have other activities in the country. We're having interviews by PAHO, and these interviews are how people look at vaccination, how the healthcare workers work with vaccination. We also have other nurses going on other media houses to promote vaccine. Also, we're having them going out into the communities, finding those persons that need their second dose or their third dose to complete their vaccination. Also, we're looking at educating people more on vaccination, how vaccination works, how it saves lives, how it is there to protect others, to protect our country, and to protect our most vulnerable population.
And over the years, we've actually expanded our vaccination program to include some of the newer vaccines. There was the HPV vaccination rollout. Tell us about some of the other ones that have been added to our schedule.
We have the hepatitis B vaccine that is given at birth. That is given us within 24 hours when the baby is born at the hospital. That is one. Then, as you said, the HPV, and now we have the COVID-19 vaccine.
And even the flu vaccine, because we didn't get that till like the last decade, no?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Now, you know, people are as time goes by, they have concerns over vaccinations. How important is the education portion? I know, you know, when you talk about the efforts that nurses like yourselves would do, it starts from when the mother is pregnant and she goes in for that checkup at the clinic, that you get this information out to them. That's the case?
Yes. Prenatally, yes. It starts like with every education that you have to give the mother. Here, we concentrate in doing education in regards to the different types of vaccination, the breastfeeding, which is something very important and dear to us. All the different problems or dangers in pregnancy. So that encompasses all the education that is given to that mother whenever she comes, from the time she books to the time she follows all her prenatal clinics until delivery.
And also we look, sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
We look at,
Go ahead.
yes, we look at the mother and see if she's fully vaccinated also, because she gets her tetanus during the time of pregnancy. And if that mother needs her vaccination at that time, she gets it, and she also gets her flu vaccine. We look also at the other aspects of the integrated aspects of care for the mother, because we see if this mother is a high-risk mother, if the mother needs her, the blood works that the mother needs, a whole lot of things and education go on during this time when the mother starts clinic. And as we know that we would always promote breastfeeding, because that is one of the first vaccination that the child gets when the child born.
What other vaccinations do people have to take as adults? I know tetanus is one. When I had a bad injury the other day, they said you need to get a tetanus shot. So that's one. What are some of the other ones?
We have the influenza, the flu vaccine, and then so adults can also get the measles, mumps, and rubella, as you said, the tetanus, and then now they can get the COVID vaccine.
Right.
Some persons that are traveling also request for the yellow fever vaccine, because if they're going to a place that has yellow fever, then they need that vaccine also. It's not a vaccine that is given routinely here in the country, but when one is traveling, then they get that also.
All right. And finally for me, with respect to vaccine rollout in the rural communities, how is that being done, and how often is that being done?
Usually the nurses have a mobile schedule that they go monthly to an area. Most of the time, every month or 6 to 8 weeks, they go to the rural areas. So they have a certain area within that community that they have their mobile vaccination program. And also, when they go into that community, they look through their cards and they see anybody that did not come for that vaccine at that time, then they have to go out and look for that person before they come back into the health center, so that these persons can get their vaccine.
All right. So Nurse Blanco and Nurse Middleton, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we wrap up this morning?
Just add to what Nurse Middleton just said, that we're hoping that in the near future we can add the COVID-19 vaccination as well, so that it can roll out as well with the rest of the vaccines, and we wouldn't have like an area that we're having right now to be vaccinating the population. So I want to encourage each and every listener this morning that has not received their COVID vaccine, and if you fall within that phase, to kindly find an area where they're vaccinating so that they can be educated and get the vaccination.
All right. Thanks to both of you, Nurse Rosalva Blanco and Nurse Lilia Middleton. We do wish you guys a very pleasant morning and happy vaccination week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and remember, vaccines save lives. Protect yourself and protect your family.
All right, thank you so very much. We're about to take our break for the morning to jump on into our final conversation. The Belize Zoo, they've got a new director. We'll tell you who it is when we come back.
This COVID update was brought to you by Foltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.
If we are only as strong as our families, businesses, institutions, and the communities that surround us, then by giving businesses the power to grow, entrepreneurs the ability to expand, and by giving our families the right to own something, the Belize Bank gives you the power to build a nation, our nation. We are stronger together. The Belize Bank, our country, your bank.
It's a fact that with Smart, you get truly unlimited everything. Only with Smart, you get unlimited data anytime. While with the other guy, it's only double data on weekends. With unlimited data every day with Smart, there's no need to wait. So, it's a fact that our unlimited plans beat the competition. Stop being measured and told when to use your data and get unlimited talk, text, and data. Experience the true unlimited plans with Smart. That's a fact. Make the switch and live smart.
2020 taught us the importance of being connected to the virtual world, and NextGen is here to keep its commitment to you. Even if you're physically apart, NextGen keeps you digitally connected.
Okay everyone, thank you for following me today.
NextGen provides more than just an internet plan. They provide service plans that support all your online needs. Sign up today and get your NextGen's ultra high-speed internet service. NextGen, powered by Central TV and Internet.
COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a new coronavirus introduced to humans for the first time. It is spread from person to person, mainly through the droplets produced when an infected person speaks, coughs, or sneezes. These droplets can land in the mouths or noses of people who are nearby. These droplets are too heavy to travel far in the air. They only travel approximately 1 meter and quickly settle on surfaces. This is the reason person-to-person spread is happening mainly between close contacts. The exact time that the virus can survive on surfaces is not yet known. So it is wise to clean surfaces regularly, particularly in the vicinity of people infected with COVID-19. Hands touch many surfaces, which can be contaminated with the virus. You should therefore avoid touching your eyes, nose, or mouth, since contaminated hands can transfer the virus from the surface to yourself. When coughing or sneezing, cover your mouth and nose with the bend of your elbow or use a disposable tissue. If a tissue is used, discard it immediately into a closed bin. The most effective way to prevent the spread of the new coronavirus is to clean your hands frequently with an alcohol-based hand rub or soap and water. This will eliminate the virus if it is on your hands. Stay healthy and prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Welcome Welcome back to Open Your Eyes. We're moving now into our third and final segment for the morning. Like we did mention that the Belize Zoo, they've gotten a new director, but it's not a new face. It's actually somebody who we all know. And I'll tell you what, the country, we've learned to love him. We've got here with us Celso Put, who is actually the director of the Belize Zoo. Celso, good morning.
Hey, John and Marlene, good morning.
Is that April?
No, unfortunately, this is one that didn't appear in my study site. So this was actually taken on a remote sense camera, no? So it's not April.
Oh, man. So you haven't named that one as yet, as much as that is in the wild.
This one is in the wild, yes. This one is in the wild.
Yeah. So you're at the forefront of what the country loves, of course, of what the world knows about our country. The only zoo that have got all the animals in their natural environment. How do you feel about this new post?
It's a little bit overwhelmed, but I am humbled. It's a tall challenge. Sharon started something really good, and she left us a real legacy. You know, the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center is probably the most loved treasure by all Belizeans. This is something that I think we're now seeing third generation Belizeans passing through the gates. So this is a landmark for Belizeans. You know, we've all come. Some of us started out with April, as we were chatting out earlier, and now we had Junior Body, and now we have different animals that we've come to love over the years. No.
I didn't even think about that. You know, there was the generation of April, the generation of Junior Body, and now they've moved on to next generation. But Celso, let's step back for a moment, and I do want to pay homage to Sharon for the incredible groundwork that she's laid in establishing the zoo and in ensuring that it was done in a manner that we can be proud of. So let's what has it been like for you guys there? I'm sure this appointment is this promotion is bittersweet.
Right, it is. We would have much liked for Sharon to see what she had cultured here in Belize. No, we have a competent staff, we have qualified staff that can take on this baton and move forward with it. So it is indeed bittersweet because recently in her TED Talk at the University of Belize, she had indicated that she was passing on the baton. And really and truly, that has been happening over the years. You know, each of us have been assuming different roles and responsibility at the zoo to the point where Sharon was only coming into the zoo to work with her animals. I mean, she have animals like Panama that she raised from that bird was a chick. And so she has a special bond with that bird. Coming in to feed Panama on a daily basis was one of the chores that she has to stay with. And so it's a pity that she's not been able to see what she really labored for over the years.
And I mean, it's probably been a very tough time as you move forward after her passing. We were talking before we went on air how internationally there have been some spectacular features on the work that she's done. What has that done in terms of kind of bringing the Belize Zoo back into the spotlight?
Well, to be honest with you, the zoo is always in the spotlight because it's one of the few places people could have visited during the lockdown. And I must say that the support we've gotten from the Belizean public over the past year has been tremendous. But what has happened is that with the international coverage Sharon's life has gotten, is that we are rekindling relationship with people from the past. So past donors, past supporters are reaching out. And a lot of people are committing their support, their continued support to the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center.
Now, go ahead.
I've got to say that I feel I feel personally blessed knowing Sharon. We've had countless conversations with her. As a matter of fact, I think she came in studio with us a few times. She has been recognized across the world. She actually lived her dream here in Belize, and for that, I'm so grateful for. Lost for words here, Celso. How do you plan on pushing forward the Belize Zoo with respect to the fact that it's not an easy feat?
Yeah, so it's not an easy feat. That is for sure. Especially with the current pandemic and the impact it has had on tourism and to a larger extent on the economy of the country, particularly the economy of the zoo.
Yeah.
We rely heavily on tourism. The Belizeans that visit the Belize Zoo pay a fraction of what international visitors pay. Belizeans pay $7 to go into the zoo. Visitors to the country pay $30.
Wow.
So visitors to the Belize Zoo are subsidizing Belizean visits. But these are really the people who support the work, the conservation work of the Belize Zoo. And so a lot of people don't know, but the zoo is a nonprofit, and basically all the money we generate, we reinvest that back into programs. We don't have to, we have our social program that we also work with, you know, we have two communities that we work closely with. We have the Mahogany Heights community, and we have La Democracia. These are our direct stakeholders, and over the years we have developed projects and programs with these communities. Not having that revenue, we really haven't been able to do that. So grants out there, grant resources have dwindled as well, and so there's a lot of people competing for the same pot of gold.
Yeah.
And we currently are just focusing on staying afloat, you know. Prior to the pandemic, we had close to, I think it was 58 employees, and currently we have 32 employees.
Wow.
These people that remain, I mean, I'm not saying that the others who left were not committed, but these people have shown their commitment to the zoo, the zookeepers, the maintenance staff. And basically what we have done is we created a shift system where every 7 days a crew come in, because we could keep everyone or we cannot afford to keep everyone. So what we did was we provide for most of the staff that are needed on a daily basis. So you get a 7-day work shift. So we're all working on reduced pay, we're all working on reduced days. But the commitment, you know, that is really what is driving me right now, is the commitment from the staff, the commitment from the people working on the ground at the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center. I mean, we have some very, very committed people. We have people like Umberto Woolers, who is in charge of the animal collection. He's been at the zoo for 30 years.
Wow.
You know, we have one of the staff over at the Tropical Education Center. He's been there for 27 years. We have our maintenance supervisor. He's been at the zoo. Vladimir has been at the zoo for almost 18 years. We have Jamal, who runs now who is helping out with the conservation programs at the zoo. He's been at the zoo for more than 12 years. Our gift shop manager has been at the zoo for 11 years, Mrs. Gongora. And Miss Diana Pierce over at the Tropical Education Center, who's the site manager, has been there for 11 years. So we have, I mean, when we look at it, we have more than 130 years in aggregate of experience running different departments of the Belize Zoo and Tropical Education Center. So these people have shown their commitment, and I am very happy to be leading them, to be working with them and providing vision where we want to take the zoo into the future.
Yeah, no doubt. It's such a tough time to take up the leadership of the zoo, looking at the challenges which we've documented over the past year. But it is something, and we were saying before that you've been a very visible part of the zoo and the work that happens there, and even with the Tapir project as well. But what excites you the most? What are you really looking forward to in terms, after you get through the survival of the pandemic phase, what's the goal that you have in mind?
So the role as zoo in conservation is evolving, it's changing. I see taking the zoo to more a center for conservation science. Generally, we associate zoo with amusement parks or recreation. Thankfully, most people know the zoo as this big classroom, this big outdoor classroom, because we have provided a lot of education material throughout the years on different animals, whether it's individually, whether it's as a species, we have done that. So when you go to the zoo, you are usually left with something. You either learn about the problems tapirs are facing in the wild, or for example, what are the current threats to jaguars and what is being done to help them. And so taking the zoo, moving the zoo towards a center of conservation science means that we need to be doing a little bit more research. So more research is needed, you know. For example, working on the ground, I talk with some of the hunters, you know, and some of the hunters say, man, some of the hunting season you guys have in Belize not really correlate with when the animal and the produce. So we need to look at that. When are these animals really reproducing? Is the hunting season that is currently legislated for these animals? Are they in line with what is really happening in the field? So those are some of the things we're seeing. You know, we have several species in Belize that are endangered. They're still in healthy population here in Belize, but regionally, these animals might be critically endangered, and Belize might have some of the last stronghold for these population. And so when you look at species like the tapir, species like the yellow-headed parrot or the scarlet macaws, those are species that are endangered, we'd say, in the region, but in Belize, we still have hope, and our hope with these species can expand into the region, you know, that we can provide genetic material for some of these species that need to be whether reintroduced or we could have breeding programs. There's a lot we can do. So putting research at the forefront of the zoo is one of the things we're looking forward to.
Fantastic. All right.
Indeed. But Celso, you know, there are a lot of people who would say, you know what, they would want to see other exotic animals. I did watch a clip from you that says, you know what, that's a no-no. Why is that a no-no?
Thanks for asking that question, John, because some people did ask. So when I get a lion now, you know, and the exotic do amuse people, you know, but really and truly, when Sharon started the Belize Zoo, the idea was to bring the people of Belize closer to their native animals so that they can learn and appreciate these animals and then advocate for their protection and conservation. And we're going to step that up. That is really what we're going to do, is bring more to the people of Belize, your natural treasures, you know, and make them learn about them and make them appreciate them, and make when we're talking about protecting their habitat, they understand exactly what we're talking about. They know that we stop hunting, they know that we want to stop hunting or anything like that. What we want is for people to understand that these animals play a vital role in our country's ecological profile, in the ecosystem, the services they provide. For example, the tapir has been noted as one of the most important species in climate change to help combat climate change. Why? Because they eat a lot of food, they eat a lot of seeds, and they defecate, they poop all over the forest, and then you get trees start to growing again, and that is important if we're going to help fight climate change naturally.
There are some naturally efficient gardeners.
Right, very.
In the wild.
That's what they're called, forest gardeners.
Yeah.
And nutrient recyclers, because, you know, they eat up to 50 pounds a day, and all that food they eat, a lot of poop, a lot of nutrients go back into the earth.
Yeah. You know, so, speaking of that, now we've got the John Smith Road, Link Road, which that particular area as well is also home to these animals. But what do you say to motorists through that area?
It's not only the John Smith, John. It's the Coastal Road, it's the Caracol Road.
Yeah.
All of these new roads that are being put in place or are being upgraded. We need to make sure that we're putting in place mitigation plans for wildlife, not just stop here. Because you have the jaguars across these roads, you have monkeys to move. So if you're putting in place these roads, for example, the Coastal Road, you're dissecting the forest there because you're opening the road. And if the monkeys, for example, the howler or the spider monkey, they're not likely to cross the road, so you're going to leave them in little small pockets of islands where we call forest fragments. So we need to make sure that these developments are taken into consideration the needs of these animals for them to successfully cross.
I recall when you were talking about your Tapir project, you'd made recommendations along those lines for these projects, that there could be the tunnels that could be implemented under the road so animals can pass there, or the trees that will connect above so animals can still
canopy,
move there.
yes.
Have you been able to get any sort of buy-in into these types of protection or wildlife?
Unfortunately, no, but we are presently working as a coalition, the Maya Forest Corridor Coalition. We're presently working with the developers of the Coastal Road to see that we can get some of these things in place. I didn't just come up with those ideas. These are things that have worked. I spent some time in the U.S. looking at this, especially in Montana, in the Yellowstone National Park, where there are effective wildlife crossing. I've spent some time in Costa Rica, where they are retrofitting some of their roads, some of their culverts, so that animals can cross, where they're growing trees very close to the highway, like large trees, and then they have these bridges, these aerial bridges where the monkeys and the sloths and the possums and other species can cross. So I didn't invent these things. These are what countries are doing, and they're spending millions of dollars to retrofit their highway. And we are at a point where we're developing these roads where we can save lives because we avoid accident. But we can save resources, we can save money if we put them in place before time.
So you know, such important information there, and I'm sure now with this new position and with the work that you want to, the vision that you want to execute at the zoo, it'll also give people more opportunities to learn and understand their habits and to become advocates as well. I will confess that we are thoroughly distracted by these charismatic animals on screen. Which you get to enjoy on a daily basis. Lucky you.
That is what happy animals do, you know. You can tell that they're happy. I mean, they're healthy.
I want to be this one.
Just hanging out.
Hanging by his tail, you know. Not a worry in the world.
But you're right in terms of trying to put in the proper infrastructure in place so these animals could cross from point A to point Z and continue there with their livelihood.
Right. And the zoo has been expanding in what we call landscape conservation. And basically it's putting lands aside. I don't know how familiar you are with what was originally called the Central Belize Biological Corridor.
Yes.
Which basically connect animals moving or wildlife, or say, moving from
the jaguar crossing sign too. And there used to be the signs that said you were entering the corridor and signs that said jaguar crossing.
That has been really minimized, and now it's now called the Maya Forest Corridor, because really it's linking the Maya Forest, and it's a very significant corridor, not only for Belize but for the region as well. And the zoo is smack in the middle of this corridor. And so over the years we have been getting land, we have been acquiring land, and so in an ideal world you would hope that there would be no need for zoos and people would be able to enjoy and see their wildlife out in the wild and free ranging. And so putting aside some lands for these animals is important, and one of the mission of the zoo is to conserve wildlife and their habitat.
Yeah.
And so we are working towards that, and we're working with the coalition, the Maya Forest Corridor, which is a whole group of us working, not just the zoo,
Yeah.
to secure a future for these animals so that they can move from the north to the south of the country. They'll still have the coastal road, they'll still have the Western Highway to traverse, but it would be a lot less arduous for them to move. You know, when you lock animals in, you have a lot of problems that can happen. You know, you have genetic inbreeding.
Yeah.
When animals can move about, you have genetic variation, so they're less susceptible to diseases and stuff like that.
That's right. You're totally right. You're totally right. So while you're at the helm, and we know that time is dwindling just like that, any new species of animals found in Belize will be placed there. I got to understand you have coyotes.
Still want the new animals. Tell them you don't put animals in captivity.
John, I'm surprised, John. I'm surprised that you only get the animal them based on unfortunate incident, I would say. You know, sometimes they're knocked down by cars and bring in the zoo and they say, oh, we find this really cute animal, and they get knocked down on the road. And so we nurse that animal, we provide them with good health care, and if it can be released, we release it back after a good health check.
Yeah.
For example, the Jabiru stork, Boomer, most people would remember Boomer. You know, he fell out of a nest and he had a broken wing. There's no way a bird that big can make it back into the wild with a broken wing. So the vets, they fix him up, put pins in at the wing, and he can serve as an educational ambassador at the Belize Zoo. So all the animals at the zoo have unique stories, and that is what we share with the public, for them to understand how these animals really got to the zoo. We don't like to keep animals in captivity.
Yeah.
But what we have done with the animals we've kept is we're providing them with the best care. We're providing them with an exhibit that depicts their natural habitat as best as possible.
All right.
So one of the things you can see is I would say more interaction with the animal.
Yeah.
We recently started a Tapir Happy Hour.
Oh, cool.
Tapir Happy Hour is on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 11. So basically, when you go to the zoo, you pay $1 to get one treat, and you meet up with the different zookeepers across the zoo, and you get to feed the tapir, whether it's lettuce or a stick of celery or a carrots, or sometimes they collect trumpet leaf. It's a way how we're connecting people with the animals, but we're also allowing you to help us care for them, especially during this crisis.
Yeah, I do get jealous when I see how they.
But one of the things we're also doing, I was listening to the previous conversation, is we're actually doing virtual tours. So a lot of university groups, a lot of organizations in the US are booking virtual tours with us, so we're doing virtual tours. We also piloted a night tour virtually.
Oh, cool.
So we're thinking outside the box because the animals they need to eat.
Yeah. and they eat a lot. Of course, Celso, it is a great opportunity for us to remind people that you do accept donations to help to care for the animals. That's been part of the ongoing efforts over the past year as you have suffered the economic fallout of COVID as well. So how do people donate?
Right now, we're encouraging people to visit the zoo. You know, come visit the zoo, see the animals. A lot of these animals are used to seeing people. A lot of these animals have become accustomed to seeing people. So visit the zoo, pay the entrance fee. By paying the entrance fee, you're helping us provide for these animals. You're helping us support the staff that provide a daily care for these animals. While you're visiting the zoo, if you have extra dollars in your pocket, bring some fresh fruits, bring some vegetables. If you could bring some meat, but people don't want to travel with meat, so that's okay. If you have more disposable income, then we accept donation, financial donation, monetary donation. You can do it through our website. If you got credit cards, we accept credit cards. So BelizeZoo.org, and the donation button is right there.
Okay.
You also have the information for bank deposit on belizezoo.org website, but it's the Belize Bank Corporation Limited, account number 8915, the Albert Street branch. And so we're accepting monetary donation, of course, but we understand that it's hard time. But if you can pitch in, like you're seeing there, we're doing beef. The animals at the zoo, I want to tell you one thing, eat healthy. They eat. And that's one of the most important things for us, that all the animals are getting a balanced diet. So the animals are basically put ahead of everything, because without the animals, we won't have the zoo.
That's right. That's right. All right, Celso. So now we know exactly what to do if we'd like to donate. And you're also asking people, if you're going there, take some fruits along, because the animals, they do eat fruits as well. Thank you so very much for joining us this morning, Celso. And best
Thanks
of luck.
for having me, Marlene and John. Always a pleasure.
All right. Well, we're about to take our final break. When we come back, we will be wrapping things up. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
In these challenging times, the one thing that is certain is that the Belize Bank Limited is here for you. There is nothing more important than your health and safety, and we continue to make every effort to make banking safer for you. Our staff is working around the clock to make sure you can do your banking conveniently 24/7 using our mobile banking app and online banking, and keeping ATMs up and running. We value your relationship with us and are here to provide the support you need. First responders are also out there 24/7. Thank you, healthcare workers, security forces, firefighters, caregivers. You are all appreciated. Stay safe. We will get through this together. The Belize Bank, our country, your bank.
Hello, Belize. You may not be aware of the new travel requirements set in place by the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. Passengers traveling to the U.S. must present a negative COVID test or a documentation of having recovered from COVID-19 to travel to the U.S. In light of this, Maya, in partnership with Caring Hands Clinic, have established testing centers in all their municipal airports. Caring Hands Antigen Test Center is operational in San Pedro, Belize City, Dangriga, Placencia, and Hopkins. These testing facilities are staffed by licensed healthcare professionals, including doctors, registered nurses, and nurse practitioners. Testing is done using Abbott rapid test devices that are FDA approved and made in the USA. The service is safe, fast, affordable, and the close proximity of the centers makes them convenient. Walk-ins are welcomed, but appointments are encouraged. If you would like to make an appointment, please feel free to do so at Make your appointment, get tested, and in 15 minutes, you can get back to your vacation.
Currently, we're using Smart Elite VoIP calling plan. We use it interbranch, we use it to call outside, and we also use it to call internationally. It's far cheaper than what we used to have before. Our equipment, our new PBX box is new. So the PBX is very good because I can call to my Sartaneja branch, I can call to my Kikaka branch, I can call to San Pedro branch, and there's no cost using the PBS. Actually right now, since we're in different locations, I can call main office from where I am at a no cost using the PBX system. I would recommend it, sure I would, especially the big enterprises who has a lot of employees. There's a lot of reduction in costs, 50% of saving. Put that on a year, It's a lot of money that we're saving. Money that we could return to our members since we give back dividend to our members.
Visit our showroom or call 670-6710 to find out how Smart's corporate plan and PBX systems can benefit your business. Consultation is free.
Just like that, we are back, and we need to go though. We have got, like we mentioned earlier this morning in the intro, there are news coming out every single day. What's going to take place today, we're not sure, but at the same time, we do advise for you to stay tuned to Channel 5 and, of course, our social media pages. And, of course, look out for our 6 o'clock news report. If you've got any questions, any concerns at all, you could always drop us a line at oye@channel5belize.com. You could check us out on Facebook at Open Your Eyes BZ, and of course on Instagram at OYE Belize. You can join us again tomorrow morning when you open your eyes.
Start your morning right.
As per usual, you keep your eyes, your minds,
and your hearts open. We'll see you soon. Enjoy your day, Belize.
Open Your Eyes was brought to you by the Belize Bank. Our country, your bank.